My name is Bob Wardlaw. I was born in Victoria, Texas, 1937, and my father worked for an oil company, and so we moved around quite a bit. I wound up finishing Lake Charles High and went to LSU, and then I went into flight training in 1958 and got my wings in 60, and was in the Marine Corps for 10 years, and got out in December of 69 as a major, and then went to work for Delta Airlines, and I had a wonderful 28-year career with them. So I've been retired for 11 years, so I'm a lucky man.
Where did you actually take your flight training?
Pensacola. As a Marine and Navy pilots trained together. So I had some Marine instructors and some Navy instructors and Navy and Marine students at the same time. I went through Pensacola for basic training and propellers, T-38s and T-28s, and through carrier qualification. And then I went to Kingsville, Texas, and for advanced training in jets, flew the F-9 and then the F-11, which was what the Blue Angels were flying then, so we thought we were hot stuff doing that. Yeah, we were.
When did you actually get overseas?
Well, I was overseas in Japan in 62 and 63, but that was just on a deployment for a year. I went to Vietnam in November of 67 and returned December of 68, 1968.
I was just going to say that you obviously went in a lot sooner. Were you a volunteer? Did you always want to fly? Is that what you joined for?
Yeah. And a lot of my contemporaries, I was in a flight training, I got back from Japan in 63, so through 66 I was a flight instructor. And a lot of my friends got out and went the airlines in. And if I'd have been a lot better off. But I said, well, Marine Corps has been good to me. I owe them an overseas tour. I don't really mind. So when I left Meridian in, I guess, fall of 66, they waited a year before they sent me over. So I lost 2 years seniority with airlines. But I got back and got a good job and was happy.
People just have no idea. You kind of followed the war a little, those of us that are a little older.
Sure.
But you really didn't know what was happening over there. What were you doing
Well,
at that time?
I was flying Marine A4s, which is a attack plane, and fighter attack. And our basic mission was close air support. And so I felt good about supporting the troops, Army and Navy, anybody that needed some help that was under fire on the ground or something like that. As far as what was going on, like politically, we knew it was kind of hopeless, the war. But we went because we volunteers, and that was our mission.
Now, where did you fly out of? Where was you based?
I was based in Chulai, which was about 60 miles south of Da Nang, and which is up in what they call I Corps, which is the northern part of South Vietnam. Chulai was a large base. It had, when I got there in 67, it had a nice big concrete runway. There were 2 Marine Air groups there. I was in MAG 12, and we flew A4s. Across the way was MAG 11, and they flew F4s, Phantoms. And then in the same proximity was Tam Key, which was part of a Chulai area. An Americal division was there. And then there was, hundreds of helicopters, Army helicopters all around. So it was a big base.
How far away from a lot of this action were you? Was there a place in Vietnam where you were totally away from war?
Not that I found. We weren't under heavy attack all the time, but we did get, every now and then, they would lob a few rockets into our base. And we were on the coast, on the beach, which was a little bit out of their range. So, but MAG 11 across the Dang, they took some direct hits and a time or two killed 4 or 5 guys in a we called it a hooch where we lived. Everybody heard of the Battle of Tet, which was in January of '68, and that's when they made a big offense, big push to for the North Vietnamese. And at that time, we were under a rocket attack, and I can remember our bomb shelter was behind our hooch, so we were down in there, and a couple of rockets lobbed in and made it to our ammunition dump. And so we're sitting there, and it went off, and it looked like an atomic bomb going off. You know, you have the big mushroom on the bottom, and our eyes got real big, and it just, we were far enough away with it, it just blew screens off and some damage like that. But when it went off, we had 4 hangars, and the first 2 had just demolished. The third one they had to tear down. Our hangar happened to be last. I was in VMA 311, and it cracked all the walls, and they said it was still good. But a couple of rockets did a lot of damage there. It didn't. I don't think we had a lot of casualties, but that was the closest we got to any direct fire and everything like that.
That's pretty close.
Yeah, it was. It had got our attention, I tell you.
How much aircraft was lost during that?
We didn't lose very many. Mag 11 on the other side lost probably half a dozen or more like that. We were fortunate. We did a lot of operating without the hangars. You know, that was more of a handicap than anything. That was, we all hear about the Tet offense, and it was a big offensive movement, but it really wasn't that effective by the North Vietnamese. They didn't do that much damage to our troops, and we killed a lot of them because he came out in the open then. But that was a real turning point politically. I mean, I think everybody realized that we couldn't win the war there. And politically, that wasn't our mission, I don't think, to win the war. My feeling was that the reason that we were fighting was to try to get the North Vietnamese to negotiate North and South Vietnam and live happily ever after. Well, they weren't going to do that, Ho Chi Minh had been promised, from what documents I've read and studied, that at the beginning of World War II, it was inferred to him that if he would fight the Japanese, then the French would leave and he would have Vietnam. It'd be one, Indochina, that'd be one country. Well, at the end of World War II, we're not going to do that. French are going to keep Indochina. He said, well, we're going to fight you. And he did. And he ran them out in 1955. And then the wisdom of the Geneva Convention, instead of saying, okay, you got your country, they said, well, let's divide it up. We'll have a North and a South. Well, that doesn't work. So that was when we were getting more involved. We were trying to help the South Vietnamese army with advisors and ammunition, whatever. And of course, 10 years later, we had 500,000 troops entering there, so it sort of got out of hand, to say the least.
You mentioned, obviously, Tet changed things politically, but for the people who were in Vietnam at the time, the soldiers and the airmen, did it have an effect then on how they went about things? Were they aware of it at that time? Well,
from what I saw, from what contact I had with the ground troops, and I know the pilots, we never thought about, oh, we don't want to do this, we don't want to go fly that, It was a mission, so we did it. And I think the troops were the same way. I'm sure, I left in January of '68, and it went on for another 6 years. I'm sure the last few years, they were getting a little disheartened, because, seeing people die for apparently no reason, so that was tough. But when I was there, we didn't think we were going to win the war, but we wasn't like, oh, let me out of here, There were very rarely anybody turned their wings in or anything like that. I had a friend in the Navy who did about 4 or 5 Vietnam cruises, and he said the first 2 or 3 guys were fighting for missions. Oh, let me over there, let me. And then the last couple, you had guys with head colds, or the plane would go down, or, you know, it was. You could tell that it was a sort of a wasteful expenditure of pilots and planes like that. So, anyway.
Yeah, I can imagine at that point, kind of the
Yeah.
morale does begin to sag a little bit. And
Yeah.
You wonder.
I'm sure that was just grumbling, like, you know, Korean Wars. Some of those guys were doing the same thing, I'm sure.
Over there, did you actually get any feeling of what was happening back home? What the feeling was?
Well, oh yeah, we were aware of you know, the newspapers, and knew we didn't get any television or anything, but you know, I knew that the protests were going on, and people burning the draft cards and so forth, and that was a big difference too. That it was a draft. In other words, you draft somebody, they don't want to go, and you send them, they're not going to be very happy. And I've heard comparison today say, well, is Iraq like Vietnam? Well, we don't have a draft. Everybody's volunteer. Now, I'm sure those over there 3 and 4 times are saying, hey, you know, let's not do this anymore, or something like that. But they're still there. They're banging away, doing a good job.
I was going to talk about, or ask you about, you were talking about air support for the ground troops.
Mhm.
Why don't you explain a little bit of what you were doing?
Okay, close air support, it's just what its name indicates. We're providing air weapons delivery to ground troops. And the way it works is you have 2 types of controllers. One is a forward air controller airborne, and one that's on the ground with the troops. The airborne guys were flying, we called them bird dogs. They were L-19s that were sort of little Piper observation planes, and they'd fly around, and we would check in with them, and he would give us the mission, suspected mortar positions or troop movements or troops in contact. He'd give us a run-in heading, and you know, left or right turns, and if there's any enemy fire, he'd advise you about that. And then he would shoot a smoke rocket and say, okay, hit my smoke, or 50 meters, 12 o'clock, or whatever, from where his target was. And then we'd commence our runs. And normally close air support missions consisted of, we'd have, each plane had 2 500-pound napalms, and I'm trying to think, I think it was 12 250-pound snake eye bombs, which had fins that would open up. You could drop them low level, very accurate, and the fins, when you released them, they separate from the plane. These fins would pop up like an umbrella and just stop them in midair, and you could fly out away from the explosion and drop them real accurate. So that was basic close air support. And we used those weapons. Sometimes we'd have rockets, or we used one kind of rocket pod had 19 rockets in it, and could carry 3 on each side. We had what they call a multiple bomb rack, which we could attach the bombs to. We attached these rockets to it. So that was 6 times 19 is 60. A bunch of rockets, 2.75 rockets, and we had what they call an intervalometer, where you could fire them one at a time, or you could hold your release button down, and you'd fire them maybe one every half a second, and they'd go toot, 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 toot. Or if you were really feeling frisky, you'd fire them all at the same time, and it looked like a cloud of smoke you're flying through. And these rockets, when they come out, fins would open up so it would direct them. And every so often, instead of all four fins coming up, you'd just get three, and one of them would start squirreling around and hit some other rockets. So it was, that was fun. Then we had Zuni rockets, which were 5-inch rockets, and these were quite effective. They'd go supersonic, so the noise would scare whoever you're shooting at, and they had a pretty good. I'm not sure what the size of the warhead was, but it would tear up quarters or foxholes or wherever you're shooting at, And then we had other type of bombs we'd fly. We call them slick bombs, without the snake-eye capability, and we'd do usually 500-pounders, some 750-pounders. The largest thing I ever dropped was a 2,000-pounder. And these were for tunnels. The Vietnamese had extensive tunnels, almost cities built underneath the ground. And so they'd think, okay, this is Tunnel City here. So we'd fly up there, and this 2,000-pound bomb, we had to carry it on our center line because it was so big. And you drop it with a delayed fuse, and you could just see it just kind of gliding in, We'd be up orbiting watching it, and it'd disappear down into the ground. And then about a second later, it's like a burp, go boom, just kind of go up. So, I mean, a 2,000-pound explosion under the soil there was, I'm not sure how effective it was, but anything in that area would be hurt.
One question here, you're talking about dropping all this. How low were you flying to drop all this stuff?
Well, napalm and a snake-eye bomb, we'd drop them like 500 feet. We'd be real low because you could be more accurate like that. And those, here again, it depends on what your mission was. If you were just a suspected position, we may drop it at 1,000 feet. If it was, if you heard the term troops under contact, which means they were coming through their lines, or they needed real close support, we may press it in and drop it a couple hundred feet, or as accurate as we could to support them. But most times, we didn't have to press that much. But and to answer your question, the normal bomb, say a normal 500-pounder, we'd release, say, at 4,500 feet. That kept you at a small arms fire, and it gave you time to, egress where you wouldn't be caught in your own shrapnel or something like that. And we didn't do much air to air. We were basically close to air support, and south of the DMZ mainly. We didn't get into the Route Pac 1 up by Hanoi and Red River, where those Air Force and Navy guys were really getting hammered up there.
Did the North Vietnamese at this time, did they have any kind of anti-aircraft in these areas where you were flying, or did they have any missiles that would...
Well, we had very few missiles no missiles in the south. Every now and then they would get one up north of the DMZ, and I say about every 6 months they'd get one down there, and they would get one of our planes got shot down up there with a missile. But most of the times our threat was small arms fire, or what they call quad 12.75. You've probably seen pictures of them. It's looked like 4 20-millimeter, and they were pretty effective. In fact, one of them shot me down over there. We were on a mission up by Quezon, and said suspected mortar position. Well, Quezon was a pretty hot area at that time in '68, and later we found out this 12.75 was dug inside of a hill. Well, the FAC didn't know it, and we didn't know about it. So we were coming in on a suspected mortar position, and so I came in, dropped my napalm, pulled up. My wingman, I was -1, he was -2. He didn't drop anything. He pulled it up. He says, "-1, I've lost my canopy. I've lost my canopy." So I was coming in from my second round. I said, "Well, let me get salvo my bombs and I'll join up on you. We'll get back. What I didn't know, that he took a round through his windscreen, through his canopy. They came through, missed his head, and behind him right here was a mechanism that fired his canopy off. Like when you eject, the first thing happens is you fire this little cylinder that gets rid of your canopy, and then it fires your rocket motor and your ejection seat. Well, it got rid of his canopy. He pulled back on the power, of course scared to death, and climbing, and he thought he'd lost his engine. He thought he was at idle. He thought he was just broke. So he tried to eject and he couldn't. And so then he kind of swallowed hard and he added power, and he was flying again. So he went to the coastline and I told him I'd join up on him and head back. Well, I'm in my second run, and the forward air controller said, Dash 1 said, you're streaming fuel. He says, you're on fire. I said, oh no. And we had two little mirrors inside our cockpit that you could see the side of your plane and behind you. And sure enough, I saw flames flopping out, and by this time I've already turned toward the beach, which is about 30 miles away, I guess, something like that. Going 500 knots or as fast as that little scooter would go, I was moving because I didn't want to eject over the bad guys here, Of course, you don't know that everything is bad out there. So I'm rumbling along, and the fire warning lights are going off, and that's the first thing, you don't hang around because your plane could explode anytime. But I still didn't want to jump out. Anyway, so we're going along, and I can fly it with the trim. I lost the cable control. So I'm flying on trim, and finally it's rolling, and it started to roll over. And I'm about 3,000 feet, so I wasn't real high. So I said, well, this is it. So I reached up and I ejected, and perfect ejection. We had a super rocket seat. It was a pretty good jolt coming out, but it wasn't like the old seats that you had to worry about breaking your back or something. Anyway, boom, I'm out. But I was going 500 knots. When that chute opened, I was bruised from head to toe when I got back. So anyway, I'm floating down. I get my radio out, and Mayday and Dong Ha radar, which is right up on the DMZ, said we got a fix on you, and we'll send rescue. So by that time I was ready to land, so I put my radio back and went on the side of the hill, boogered up an ankle a little bit, but not too bad anyway. So I'm on the ground, and I gather my chute in, and looking around, I didn't see anybody. I had my gun out, I don't know what I was going to do with that, but I felt better for a while. So I put it back in and got my pulled up. We always had our emergency radio attached to us here. So I'm talking to a forward air controller, and he said, Roger, got you in sight. There's 2 helicopters that are en route right now. So it must have been 30 minutes. I was on the ground, but it seemed like forever. But anyway, they come in, they whoop, whoop, whoop. I was on the side of a hill, and I scampered on, and they took me in. He said, first of all, he said, are you okay? I said, oh yeah, I'm fine now. And he gave me a drink of water. I remember I couldn't have spit if my life depended on it. My mouth was so full of cotton. It was something. Anyway, so he said, we're going to Quezon and pick up some wounded. I said, well, okay. So they come in, and they're about 1,500 feet above small arms fire mostly. So they get over Quezon, they let down. And this guy comes running out of a bunker, solid red clay dirt all over him. And he said, he didn't say don't mess around, but I won't say the word he said. He said, we got incoming. And sure enough, I'm looking out the windows, and there's mortar shells going boom, boom. Oh, I said, God, I'm going to die in a helicopter, of all things. So nobody wanted to do that. So they brought 2 guys out, one guy on a stretcher, one guy with a leg wound or head, I'm not sure what, but he was shot up pretty good. And boom, 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 we went up. He went to this aid station in Dong Ha, and it wasn't MASH, but it was the first place they would take you. And you talk about spectacular. We landed. A doctor met. There were 3 doctors at each of us. The guy on a stretcher had an IV and the medication that he'd been getting. Two guys picked up the stretcher. The doc was reading his what his wounds were and thing, and another guy was cutting his clothes off to get him into this tent, the aid station, which was a concrete floor, and they had metal soul horses they set the stretcher on. By that time, he was already in there. They had him wiped down and cleaned up, and Doc said, rescue ship, medical ship right now. So a helicopter came in, picked him up, got him out to the Repulse or whatever the first aid ship was out there. They grabbed me, helped me in, x-rayed my ankle, and it wasn't broken or anything, so they put an ace bandage on and said, go back. But what great medical care that guys were getting there. So that was my scariest moment.
Well, that's amazing, because here you had been air support for the guys on the ground. You were one of the few pilots that probably got to see what it was really like down on the ground.
Well, yeah. Well, we had quite a few guys that, not quite a few guys, but we did have more guys that get shot down. One good friend was shot down closer to Quezon than I was, where he ejected. And he was like in some trees. And he said he could hear bullets going ching all around branches and everything like this. And this Army helicopter flew over him. And then normally they have like this rescue device they would send down, and you could get on it like an anchor. You could hold on to it, strap on it, it'd pull you up. Well, all he saw was a rope coming down. And hats off to these Army helicopter pilots. These guys were warrant officers. They were trained out of high school, and they were over there flying combat missions. They were carrying troops to and from, but they came in for this rescue. Anyway, down comes this rope, and his name was Bobby Downey, my friend that was being rescued. So he grabbed the rope and tied it around the best he could, and he's going up, knocking on limbs, and he said, "I'm not letting go of this rope." And when he got up, and as he was getting away from the trees, the rope started slipping. Well, the co-pilot got up and wrapped the rope around his arm because it wasn't tied on properly or something, and held him till they got him to a place where they could get him up in the copter. And it really boogered up this guy's arm, who I think he received the Distinguished Service Cross for it, which we well deserved. But we got some guys rescued like that. Another friend was shot down at night. He spent all night and half a day outrunning them down there before he got rescued. So these were the lucky ones, that some guys up in the north, hats off to them and Hanoi Hilton for all those years and everything. But we didn't have that many, quote, casualties. I know we had, I'm thinking 311 squadron I was in, I think we lost about 3 guys the whole year I was there. So it wasn't like the Navy guys where they'd lose half the planes and pilots like that.
I was going to ask you, what was your unit?
Okay, I was in was MAG 12, Marine Air Group 12, and I was in VMA 311, and that was my squadron I flew with the whole time I was there.
About how many planes would be in a squadron or a unit like
Well, the squadron had we had 23 planes, and they figured that 3 of them would be in overhaul and repair at one time. So you'd plan on 20 planes, but they did augment us with 20 to 25 planes sometimes. So we'd have, and the A4 was very, very mechanically reliable. I mean, it was we didn't have a lot of sophisticated radar gear or avionics or stuff to go bad. The engine was very durable, so it flew a lot. It'd take pretty good punishment, and we were lucky that it was maintainable and easy to use.
How did it differ from the other planes that the Navy or the Air Force were flying?
Well, the A4 had 5 armament stations, and a centerline station and 2 wing racks, 2 under each wing. Excuse me. Normally we carry a 300-gallon fuel tank under the centerline to give us extended time in the air. And we were really good at low level, close air support, things like that. The other airplane that was big time in Vietnam was the F-4 Phantom. You know, it was more of a fighter plane. It was designed for air-to-air, but it was also used as a bomber and close air support too. And of course, the Navy had, and we also had a A-6s, which is the intruder. I mean, those guys could carry like, I don't know, 3,500-pound bombs. I mean, and they did a lot of interdiction work up in the north. But the Navy had the A-4s, they had F-4s, they had Crusaders and A-6s, and quite a few A-7s. But the A-4 was been around. When it first started out, it had a small engine and it wouldn't carry very much. By the time I flew the E model, and it was very capable and very good. We could refuel in the air, like if you were on station and you wanted some fuel, we'd go up to a tanker and refuel, and give us another hour or two on station if necessary or whatever. So it was very versatile.
This is fascinating because we've talked to one other pilot who's a Marine, but we've talked to a couple of other guys that were flying different other missions. One guy here in Broomfield was flying with, was it the AC-130s? It was the gunships.
Oh, yeah.
And he flew that and was a communications officer.
Well, there's a gentleman, what was his name, Lisa? Tom
Campbell speaking yesterday.
Yeah, have you talked to him?
Yeah.
Okay, he flew the C-47, which is the first gunship. We called them Puff the Magic Dragons. But I can remember flying night missions, and there'd be a Puff down there, and they'd shoot those Gatling guns. Every seventh bullet was a tracer. And it looked like a flashlight pointing down when they were shooting. It was just, of course, these AC-130s now are so sophisticated.
Yeah, I got confused. I was thinking the modern plane, but he was in the C-47.
Right. The modern plane is the AC-130.
That's right. But he talked quite a bit about that. We did about an hour interview with him.
They do. I mean, those guys, they've got Gatling guns and 41 millimeter cannons and 105 howitzers, and they are laser directed, and they are very accurate and very effective too.
When you flew these missions, were you flying several missions a day coming in, refueling, going back out?
Oh yes, we flew whatever the need was, but it was not rare to fly 3 missions a day, and during TET we'd fly 5 missions. Normal, we had 4 squadrons, and the normal rotation, with 1 week, and you'd rotate the next. One squadron would fly, say, from 5 in the morning till noontime. Next squadron comes on and flies from 10 in the morning till 7 at night, or roughly those hours. One of them would fly only night missions, and the other one would be on the hot pad. So that was and hot pad was just like you were on call, but there was always somebody calling for you, so you'd be flying constantly, 7 days a week. There wasn't any, let's take a long weekend or something like that. We got R&R for which was a week or 10 days, I forget how long. But the only quote good deal we had was when you flew night. It was like a radar mission. You'd go up to north of DMZ and they'd vector you out and you drop your bomb. Well, the last plane went up, we'd fly a section. That was 2 airplanes. We'd drop our bombs, and we had a big luggage rack, which is a 300-gallon tank that we had. It was empty of fuel, and we had it cut out. We could carry luggage and stuff in it. So we'd go to Ubon, which is an Air Force base over in Thailand, not too far off across that. So we'd land there about 7 o'clock in the morning, and or 6, whatever time we got there, and we'd go in, And I mean, they had an air-conditioned truck to carry you in. And we'd go to the officers' club, which is, air-conditioned, and they had. We always thought when I first got there, gosh, they have lettuce. What? Because we were eating, seagrass, not seagrass, but we had good chow, but it was not that sophisticated. So we'd go there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we'd say, okay, I want a salad, 2 martinis, and the biggest steak you've got. So that was our liberty. And while we were doing that, we'd be buying about 400 cases of beer to put in this luggage rack. So then after we didn't have enough martinis to affect our flying, but after we had lunch and lounged around a little bit, we'd fly back to Chulai, and the beer that was our ration. We'd give half of it to the enlisted guys, and then we had in our hooch. I don't know. When I got there, we had a refrigerator, and boy, that was just great. We kept it full of beer, and our bomb shelter was this steel matting behind our hooch was right on the beach, prettiest beach I've ever seen except Pensacola. It was as pretty, it was just a golden sand. Anyway, everybody come by and we had a coffee can for the beer. I think they were 25 cents or a dime. I forget, it was cheap. And it was an honor system. So finally, after a while, somebody couldn't make change. So we'd get more money than we needed. We'd say, okay, beer's free this week. Everybody come in like that. So that was one good thing. So if I'm rambling on, just hit the kill button or whatever.
You had to be a hero, especially giving somebody the enlisted back too. 'Cause
Oh yeah, I tell you, I mean, we had it easy flying over there because we were having fun doing it. But the enlisted guys, and they were having fun too. They were proud of what we were doing. We had a situation map, and on the flight line, we'd come back in and say, flight so and so had a mission here, and what we did, or things like that. Boy, those guys were so proud. Plane captains, and they worked 18 hours a day, and the planes were kept up, and and they had, our living conditions weren't the world's best, but they were more crowded, but they were proud and didn't hesitate to do the job, I'm telling you.
Did you develop any kind of a close relationship with the guys who were working specifically on your planes? Did they move around to different planes, or?
Well, like the plane captains, you got to know them pretty well, and that was fun. We had one guy, really a super guy, great Marine, happened to be black. His name was Alexander, and he took his R&R to Hong Kong, and he told me he had some short sleeve sport coats made. I said, Alexander, that's great. And his goal was to go back to Mississippi and marry Ross Barnett's daughter. So, he had a sense of humor. I mean, these guys were funny and great, But and the gunny sergeants and everybody, it's just when you see pictures of enlisted guys working like that, I mean, they're the ones that kept the planes flying and things like refueled them and the ordnance men. God, you talk about working, loading those 500-pounders and all that stuff, and danger. I mean, it was great. It was great.
Did you get a chance to talk at all to any of the ground troops that you might have helped out at any time in some of your runs?
Not really. We saw some write-ups from. I had 2 missions that I got DFC, one for each. So I got 2 DFCs, and one of them was the ground troops that we helped out a lot, and that guy wrote a pretty flowery citation. And another was a group of helicopters. There were about 3 or 4 of them that got shot down, and we were in groups that were, they were under heavy fire, so we were helping them out. Then after we lost our ordnance, we were flying low passes, because even if you didn't have any ordnance and you came in real low, the bad guys would keep their heads down because they didn't know whether he had any more ordnance or not, until we got some other helicopters in there and gunships to rescue the crews in there and everything. So there's we did some good. Like I said, I didn't talk to very many of them, particularly man on man.
Did you ever run into any situations where you're getting reports of very close action, and did they ever just say, come on in, we don't care where you're dropping,
Well,
just get in here, because we've heard from a couple of other pilots who've had situations where they knew they were dropping in an area, they didn't know exactly how close they were getting
right.
to the people.
One of the citations I got was for this mission. A section I was, a wingman of mine took off, and we just had slick bombs, which was you can't. A snake eye you can drop close enough because you can be real accurate. A slick bomb, 50 meters would be real close, because you could be off 25 meters the other side, so anyway, we were climbing out and going to a mission up north somewhere, and we got an emergency call from what they call DASC, Direct Air Support Center. And they wanted us to go to this certain spot, and they gave us a frequency for this forward air controller. And he says, we are in close contact. Now that's the key word. When you heard close contact, that means like they were probably coming through the fence or climbing almost on top of them. And as luck would have it, it was about 3,000 feet overcast, light rain, and it wasn't dark, but it was about to get dark. So my wingman and I were talking to the forward air controller, and I told him, I said, all we have is Mark 82, which is 500-pound slick bombs, and it's going pretty close. We have to drop them close to you. So we made some low passes trying to buzz them off, and our 20 millimeter was limited, but we shot that, and finally he said, we're going to be taken if you can't help us. And I said, all right, give me some smoke and tell me which way to go. So he popped a smoke canister and threw it as far as he could, and said, on a heading of whatever it was, drop on that smoke. So I said, okay, JP. I said, and we didn't have normally you carry a flip pad for ordnance, angle of dive, altitude to release, and airspeed and all that. Well, at 3,000 feet to start with, we didn't have anything for these kind of bombs. So I said, okay, JP. I said, we'll just do the best we can. I said, try to get. So anyway, I came in and pickled a couple of bombs off close to that smoke, and that guy, it sounded like Christmas. He said, oh, you got them. They're leaving. They're going. Oh, great. I mean, and that made you feel good. So, so JP and I did a good job there. And when we got back, we were real low on fuel. But I said, JP, no sweat. We'll end at Da Nang, which is about 60 miles north of Chulai. So I say, Da Nang, this is formal so-and-so. Said, emergency straight in with low fuel. He says, field is closed. We're under a rocket fire. I said, oh, boy. So I said, okay, JP, because we're right on the coast. So I said, we'll stay over the coast. If we have to jump out, we'll be over the coast. So we got in, and I called Chula. I said, we're down to no gas, so we're coming straight in and landing. Clear the pattern. So we did, and I landed, and I made it back to our revetments, and JP made it about halfway back, and he flamed out for fuel starvation. So we were that close to losing those planes. But we had a lot of missions where you're just dropping on trees out there and you don't see anything. But when you help the guys like that, that made us feel pretty good.
Is there anything that you'd want to bring up or mention on this that we haven't really covered on this? Because we've covered a lot of ground.
Let me say one thing about, we used to call it civil action. And that's community projects outside our perimeter. Each squadron had an officer assigned to this, and officers and enlisted men alike would go out into the villages and help build things back for them, or the doctors went out with medicine. We went out and you play games with the kids, or show them that we weren't all, bad guys doing things like that. So there was a real care for the Vietnamese people. My last few months there, I was a special services officer, and there was a Vietnamese guy working for me. I don't know what his name was. We couldn't speak English, but we called him Tong for some reason. And he could build anything with the rudest, with a hatchet and some pieces of wood and a few nails. He'd build steps, or he'd build, lawn chairs, or he could do anything. So the guy was really smart, little bitty wiry guy, and so there was a side of Vietnam that it wasn't just all, napalm and shooting people. There was a lot of care. And I know this goes on now over in Iraq. Everywhere we go, we try to be as good neighbors as we can. It's hard to, when we're out there tearing the countryside up, it's hard to keep their minds.
Not very many of these things are reported, though.
Well, that's right. That doesn't make headlines. One of the most touching things I remember, flight surgeons, and I'll throw dentists in there too, are crazy bunch. If you think MASH was a satire, MASH was true to life, and somehow this group of doctors had obtained a baby that was premature. I don't know whether the mother was killed or whatever, but they had this child. I mean, I can remember looking at it, and they raised it in an ammo box in their hooch, and somebody adopted the kid and brought it back. One of the doctors did. But that was real touching.
What was it like when you came back?
I didn't get caught up in being spit on or anti-war or anything like that. I came back, late December and went to work for Delta in January the 8th. So, I was fortunate to do that. And of course, by that time, all the protesters, you'd see them on the news. They'd be burning draft cards and the Jane Fondas and all that. It was kind of disheartening. But that's their rights. You don't have to agree with them, but you agree with their right to do it.
We've talked to one guy also through the Regis program. He's an F-16 pilot, and he has flown 2 tours
Over
in Iraq.
Right.
The United Airlines pilot, and
Right.
time at East Colorado Air National Guard,
Sure.
gets sent back periodically. He thinks he's going back again probably later this
Yeah.
summer.
Oh man,
But
3
he-
times.
And he talked about the fact that their communications are such that they're getting the reports directly from the guy in the field who's
Sure.
he was actually going in early before the war started, and because the special forces were on the ground
Mm-hmm.
several days before the official
Right.
start of war, and he was getting
Missions over there for that.
yeah, and so he talked quite a bit about that, and I think it's very similar to what you describe here. Only the sense I think is the communications are so much more direct.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
talking directly to the guys who are under fire.
I mean, well, the equipment these guys have. I mean, our guys had back then. They had some FM radios on their back, and they could talk to the air controller and airborne, and he had a UHF that could talk to us. And I mean, now they got GPS and laser bombs, and they're probably they got cell phones that could talk better than anything we ever had, as far as our radios go. But that's modern equipment and everything.
He describes that quite a bit, talking about how precision the
Oh,
ordnance is, and
Yeah,
the laser-guided bombs.
I've
and
never
everything.
flown anything with those, but it's great. I was at a convention, Marine pilots, and we had a briefing by Boeing on the F-35, which is tactical fighter, which is coming out any time now, years 2 maybe. And he was saying they were going to build, I don't know, let's say 120 of them. And we thought, gosh, you know, A4, I don't know, at one time we might have had 500 or something, you know, counting the Navy and everybody. He said 120. I said, how can that support an offense or something? He said, well, when they go out, we used to carry, you know, 10 bombs apiece, 4 planes, and 50-50 chance of getting the target, you know, completely. He said, we go out with 6 bombs, we get 6 bullseyes. So that's the difference. They need less planes. It makes sense. But, you know, with the GPS and the laser, I mean, it's, you know, coming warfare, they launch these drone planes, and it's some guy in Nellis sits there in a rocking chair and drops them in Iraq with the laser guidance. Absolutely perfect, which is no threat to anybody but the drone, which is great.
It's becoming a video game for these guys.
Yeah, well, basically that. Of course, that Marine Air, back in World War II, they sort of invented close air support because, you know, we have an air wing, we have a ground troops, so they're closely coordinated. And, you know, for years they've been trying to do away with the Marine Air. Said the Air Force wants to do it and all that. And the Marine Corps said, no, we want our own. Because we train with them all the time. And you know, so we've been able to keep it. But and we practiced close air support. When I first day in the squadron, you know, that was our mission. And that was, we worked with forward air controllers. And same thing, like mostly, you know, all dummy ordnance, but that's what you did in real life.
Even without talking about technology being so much less when you were flying, still saved an awful lot of lives.
Oh, absolutely. Talk about that technology is gone. I was talking about being last week at the Naval Museum. Well, our guide was talking about some of these old planes, the technology they had. Like the first planes, they didn't have rudders. You just sort of leaned one side or the other and flew. And I didn't know this. They have an old Sopwith Campbell there, which, you know, Snoopy flew, you know, in the comic strips. But it's a World War I fighter plane. Well, it had an on switch, and the guy outside would turn the propeller, and the engine would go. And the guy had to get out of the way because the plane was moving. It didn't have a throttle. It had an on switch and off switch. In other words, if you didn't want to go this fast, you turned it off a little bit, and it would just sort of rotate, you know, a windmill. And then you turn it back on and everything. And I don't ask me why they didn't have a throttle, but they just didn't. It hadn't been invented, I guess. Who knows? And that was one of the first planes they were shooting the machine gun through the prop, and they had to come out with a cam, you know, to time it between the blades. So the first few guys shot the props off, and then somebody came up with the solution of, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll just put a little piece of angle iron on there, and if it happens to hit the prop, then it won't shoot the prop. It'll just ricochet off. Of course, you know, can you imagine a balanced prop with 2 pieces of angle iron on it like that? But that technology, I mean, we were walking on the moon compared to what those guys had, and look at what they have now. It's so good. But it's great.
That's a little bit like the general getting his glider in World War II, all armor plated.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little overloaded.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
He didn't
apparently
make it.
there was a general that they tried to armor a glider flying him into Normandy. And of course they made the glider too heavy. The glider crashed and killed
Right.
the general.
Oh man, those guys. I mean, were in the paratroopers. How brave were they?
We've talked about 3 or 4 glider pilots, and they've got some stories.
Well, you know, the saddest thing is they never got any of them on target. You know, they didn't have any directional finding gear or any identification on the ground. They just flew for a while, and the wind blew them here, or the weather was bad somewhere else. They said, "Okay, jump out or land here." Oh boy.
We're fighting strange wars now where, in Vietnam really started this, where the country goes on and they don't really become aware of what's happening with our troops.
Yeah. Well, it has to do with resolve. In other words, I was talking to this gentleman over here that, in a good book, is 1942, A Year That Tried Men's Souls, written by Winston Grooms, who wrote Forrest Gump, but he's a very good historian. And he wrote it, I saw him in a review, he said he wrote it after 9/11 because for about 6 months we had the resolve to go back and go out and really kick some tail because they attacked our country. He said in 1941 with Pearl Harbor actually, after Pearl Harbor, our resolve lasted for 5 years until the war was over. And said, and that's the difference we have now. We can't maintain the stamina for war. But you know, so much goes on. Who knows, the press and everything, and everybody's an expert that wants to do this. You know, but in my heart, I feel we're doing a good thing over in Iraq. We're giving the country a chance if they take it, and there's a lot of things they're doing over there that are good for us: schools, hospitals, and infrastructure and everything that doesn't make the news. But if they can keep their country democratic, can you imagine what a light bulb that's going to be for the rest of those countries in that part of the world? That's the reason they're fighting over there. It's a civil war type deal. But anyway, I'm not over there, so, and no one's asking my opinion, so.
Americans are the good guys.
Well, I think we are. We get, you know, we have a couple of bad apples, you know, but every barrel does, you know. But by and far, I think we can be proud of our servicemen. I know I am, and women. You know, they're pulling their share now. I'm telling you.
If you had to do it all over again, would you do it?
Oh,
Same
sure, absolutely. Of course, you know, pilots love to fly and flying jets. You know, I mean, it's just it was very exciting. You know, it wasn't much fun in war, but it was still exciting. You know, and we did good things.